Okay, welcome back to another exciting video. Rather than just focusing on these scars today, I want to talk about a few other concepts. But while we're here, before we get into that, just notice this appears to be an area where this current connects to the current coming out of the water and a current coming out from here. This is two currents that are joining with two currents. This is an intense area. Michael Steinbacher, you can see it on his map. This is along the border of Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. There are two Z-pinches, one down here and one up here, for those not aware. But while we're talking about this, going back, revisiting some of Michael Steinbacher's work, this was a video about instant high-grade metamorphic granite. He had stumbled across somebody who was able to make this. He made it by accident using electricity. And in this video, Michael Steinbacher goes into how he sent it to a lab and they did studies, and that's where he got instant high-grade metamorphic granite was their analysis they gave him. But while I was trying to process the scars, some of the other works that I found very fascinating from the Thunderbolts Project was Peter Mungo Jupp. And this video right here gets into electric fossilization. He's got a few videos he made with the Thunderbolts Project. Very fascinating stuff. He talks about the difference between petrification and fossilization, and how one appears to be, this process appears to be like a higher voltage catastrophe that may have caused this in particular to occur, whereas some of these other catastrophes, they might have just been sloshing around some things. But while I was looking at this video, he talks about some other stuff. He gets into the mythologies, and I didn't really want to make this video about mythology, but he gets into the Gorgons, Greek mythology, and how he was saying Greece is over here, but how their mythology, the Gorgons were like coming in and out of the earth, and they were associated with some of these, like the mountain formation, the creation, but in particular he was saying how these guys were associated with the petrification of some of these the giant bones and stuff. And this is from the Lakota Nation, this story, and that's where he brings you over to the Gorgons. And there's all kinds of very fascinating stuff that he opened up. I wasn't really aware of the catastrophist perspective, but he introduced me these guys to other people's work, like Georges Cuvier. He's talking about right here. This is a tree that was it was petrified, and how it was petrified. Let me see if I can start it at the right spot.
Study done by Eric Milton. He described the examination of a petrified tree trunk, essentially water and carbon, in Alberta, Canada. And I'll quote him. The piece, this is the wood, was pure silica inside. It was coated with a rougher, opaque crust of partially fused sand. The tree whose stump was petrified was alive 5 years ago. After the tree was cut down to accommodate the right-of-way for a new power transmission line, an accidental break allowed the 5 high-voltage wire contact several tree stumps still in the ground. Power was cut off within hours of the break. All of the tree roots which contacted the broken wires were fossilized. Obviously, extremes of electricity can metamorphosize matter quickly.
So when he's talking about that, obviously some of the stuff you can experiment. I don't really suggest going out and trying to electrocute a bunch of fish to see if we can fossilize them, but it is something that is apparently tangible. And when he talks about later on, he gets into let me see. Yeah. Just let him talk again.
What caused these layers? Is this perhaps an electrical effect? And I suspect it probably is. So that's one. Was the water there possibly turned to calcium carbonate? You know, I'd cite the example of H2O, which is 2 protons of hydrogen and 8 protons of oxygen, making 10 in all, whereas calcium carbonate is 50 or 5 times that number. Could some agency change this? All you need is additional neutrons. And as we know from Russian studies, whenever there's a major lightning strike, neutrons are in abundance everywhere for some strange reason. We don't know why.
Now, there's a lot more in this series. I just wanted other people to be aware of his work, if others are not. But when you go back to that part about electricity, when you have a strike, there's an abundance of neutrons, and he's talking about how that's all you really need for transmutation of matter. Well, when you're scrolling around the world, and you're looking at how the land, like up here you really see it, how it's like charges were being ripped off, and they're pulling charges from all directions to funnel in to what's going on here. Let me go back to the Gaussian surface, but so whatever's taking place in one area, it's going to cause other stuff to happen along the way. And when we see that on Earth, you're imagining there's charges ripped out. Like, notice this is almost a cross-like pattern in here, where these charges are all coming in from any which direction they can. And when you think about they're stealing, they might be stealing electrons, but if you're stealing electrons from otherwise neutral matter, then you get ions. You get a more positively charged ions, and if you're sending the ions some other, basically the point is you might wind up with a few electrons when you're demanding the charges be moved at such an intense rate where, like, it didn't matter if you were stable before. When you put up significant amounts of high voltage plus the amperage that was flowing through, like, you can see frequencies flowing through these as they're flowing. You get very distinct patterns in the bands. They're all coming at very similar widths with similar frequencies embedded in it, just ripping out charges from wherever they can and pulling it in. And obviously these effects are having, there's effects that are being caused on the land, but in this video Michael Steinbacher talks it's not just affecting the animals, this is affecting the actual geology. I'll let him talk.
And the gas station cashier had said that this guy was a savant. He was like really a genius, and he kept talking about electricity and geology and all these things that I was talking about. And he has, and nobody in town was interested. They didn't really care about electric universe geology or electricity. So I finally met him, and he explained himself. He's really a Renaissance person. He can do anything. He looks like a bear. And he claimed that he was trying to smelt ore, and he put red dirt in a crucible with 2 carbon electrodes and ran a current through the ore that he had sifted so there weren't rocks or crystals in the red dirt. The dirt was from the side of the stream in the Rockies. And he was trying to smelt the ore and separate the precious metals, and he failed. But he struck an arc, and it melted the dirt. And he ran the arc for 2 minutes. And at the end of the 2 minutes, he allowed the material to cool off, and he had created rocks. And he said that he thought they were sort of like granite. So I took them to a university, Loma Linda University, and they thought they looked sort of like weathered granite. And then they did thin slices, did testing of them. And they came back and said, no, this doesn't look like weathered granite, it looks like pegmatite, a high-grade metamorphic form of granite. And it doesn't look like it's from nature, it looks like it's man-made. So he didn't just pick this up off the desert. This seems to be man-made pegmatite in 2 minutes. Instant high-grade metamorphic granite. You're looking at an image of one of the rocks that he created, and you can see the crystals that weren't there prior to the electrical event. I have more. This sample shows very large crystals. This one right here. And as you move, more crystals become obvious as the light changes, and you can see the reflections. So it's just full of crystals, which is what pegmatite is. It's the most crystalline form of granite. So this is kind of a big deal, and it opens up the possibility that electricity can make granite an igneous rock and metamorphic rock. After the thin slices were produced, one of the professors used polarized light to examine the slides, the thin slices, and he saw this and said this is so crystalline it reminds him of man-made pegmatite. I have others. I don't know how to read these, but apparently geologists spend a lot of time reading thin slices and interpreting them. So here is one for all you geologists out there. This is made in 2 minutes in a crucible with dirt. This is another version showing the crystallization, from what I've been told, of this man-made rock. I have 2 more, and I will have links to these images at the bottom of the video in the first box that you see. And you have to click on read more to see all of the links. They're really important. I believe this is another large crystal. I'm not certain, but it's certainly pretty. And again, there will be links. One more. This is the last of the images. Again, this appears to train geology professors to be metamorphic granite, pegmatite. And the interesting thing about this is that this might explain granite, where the standard model has igneous rock bubbling up from below, cooling very slowly, surrounded by sediment, and the sediment has to disappear over long periods of time, and then the granite is exposed. But nobody's ever found half granite. They've never dug into a mountain, from what I understand, and found granite that's halfway to becoming what we know as granite. It's inexplicable. You don't find the smoking gun going, yeah, that's how granite's made. It's igneous. I think it's electrical. We live in an electric universe. It's a whole new way of looking at everything.
And that's really like part of the process here. It's not just something small. There's a much larger scale, and we're just a small part of something much greater. And to deny that there is a more powerful force out there, well, you're kind of missing some of these points, and these are pretty big when you look at the scale of things. So we'll talk more later. Just try and get a feel for the catastrophist perspective outside of, I don't know, outside of the normal way of thinking at things, I guess. Alright, take care everyone. Bye-bye.